Why in the F is that security guard all up on Sophie Cunningham? And look, I think there is a reason she got up in Sophie's face. And I don't think there was any need to sort of bow up to Sophie like that.
Finally, the Indiana Fever had a playoff moment to celebrate, but the WNBA managed to turn happiness into controversy. After their significant victory, Sophie Cunningham, wearing a leg brace, simply wanted to support her colleagues. Rather, a league security guard chose to act heroically by yelling at her in the middle of the celebration. The fans weren't pleased. Do you believe Sophie being singled out by the WNBA on purpose because she doesn't match their narrative? Leave your comments below. The scene was prepared. With one of their biggest victories in recent memory, the Indiana Fever advanced in the playoffs without the injured Caitlin Clark. The atmosphere in the crowd was electrifying. Sophie Cunningham, who has been battling her own injuries, sat on the bench to cheer her squad while the teammates celebrated. Just a streetwear player clapping for her teammates, nothing offensive or inappropriate.
Odyssey Sims hit the floor very hard during the game last night, and her teammates came out to the floor to check on her, except, of course, the girls on the bench, Caitlin Clark, Chloe Bibby, Sophie Cunningham, they came to half court. Did not cross the line, by the way. But for whatever reason, we had a situation involving Paula Blart, mall cop. That's right, played this time in the role by Wheezy from Jefferson, the Jeffersons. Showed up last night to try to check Sophie Cunningham. Did she think Sophie Cunningham was about to run out there cause an incident? Sophie Cunningham's in a damn leg contraption. It's not even a brace, it's like a contraption.
However, it seems it was sufficient to trigger Rent-A-Cop, the WNBA's very own. The league's security detail appeared out of nowhere and confronted Sophie, acting as though she had just broken onto the court or started a riot. To be clear, Sophie wasn't even present at the scorer's table in this instance, much less on the floor. She was cheering and not breaking any regulations close to half court. However, in typical WNBA form, the story was told through the pictures.
Odyssey was holding her right shoulder.
You could see it on Sophie's face. Confusion, then disbelief, then that. Trademark Cunningham glare. And, honestly, who can blame her? She's literally wearing a leg brace. She isn't sprinting onto the floor anytime soon. But instead of handling things professionally, the cop decided to get aggressive, leaning in on Sophie and shouting at her like she was some kind of troublemaker. The clip immediately went viral, not because Sophie did anything wrong, but because it exposed the bizarre double standard that has followed her throughout her career. Fans were livid. Social media lit up. Within minutes, people weren't talking about the Fever's win or Lexi Hull's plays that changed the course of a game. They were discussing how Sophie Cunningham was handled like a criminal despite being hurt and cheered. The outcry was immediate and, to be honest, well-founded. The problem is that this isn't a singular occurrence. It is a component of a pattern. Consider how Sophie has been covered in comparison to other WNBA players. She is confident, loud, and unashamedly herself.
And I think we all know that if there's one thing that male sports fans want to see in their spaces and on their screens, it's more of me.
She is also among the few athletes who publicly questions the league's accepted storylines. And as a result, she has been singled out by competing fan bases and some media sources. The fact that Sophie Cunningham has been dubbed the WNBA's villain is well known. However, it goes too far when the league's own employees begin treating her like one during a playoff victory. Let's take a reasonable approach to this. The semifinals were reached by the Fever. From the sidelines, Sophie Cunningham, Chloe Beebe, and Caitlin Clark, the players on the bench, are all having a good time. When a player is hurt, none of them go over the line onto the court. They're just reacting like every other team while standing close to the midcourt. During significant events. However, Sophie is the only one who is confronted. Caitlin was yelled at, but why? Chloe was the number. Simply put, Sophie. Fans saw this right away. People were pointing out the double standard in the YouTube and Twitter comment sections. Some people were direct about it. Because Sophie is blonde, Caucasian, and doesn't suit the league's ideal plots, she is singled out. The hypocrisy was brought to light by others. The league would have portrayed Angel Reese and Natasha Cloud as fervent, encouraging teammates if they had been in the same circumstance. Sophie, on the other hand, is called entitled and unruly. The irony here is that Sophie didn't even have a negative reaction. She refused to back down, maintained her position, and made it apparent that refused to be intimidated. However, it was evident that the entire situation was superfluous. The police officer wasn't keeping the peace. She was causing a commotion. And fans' frustration erupted when they saw that. There is more to this than a single encounter. It concerns the league's persistent issue with how it treats players who don't match the mold. This has been a problem for Caitlin Clark for the past 2 seasons. Hard fouls that go uncalled, persistent targeting on the floor, and media narratives that attempt to minimize her effect. And Sophie, who has often proved divisive, becomes entangled in the same web. The WNBA is intent on discrediting her rather than celebrating her fame. Here, it's important to remember the numbers. Among them is Sophie Cunningham. Well-liked players in the league, regardless of how the WNBA executives feel. Her participation raises the profile of the Fever, she consistently trends, and her highlights receive clicks. Fans care about her even when she isn't playing, and in a league that is in dire need of recognition and expansion, that should be significant. However, rather than taking advantage of that, the league permits incidents like this one, in which Sophie is publicly humiliated by a police officer at a playoff party. Let's now discuss the fan response, which was quite harsh. Within minutes of the video's release, trending hashtags included Free Sophie and WNBA Exposed. The league came under fire from fans for selective enforcement and for attempting to quiet players who didn't fit the mold. Some even likened it to earlier disputes, such as when Caitlin Clark's hard fouls were dismissed as a normal part of the game, or when fans were unjustly accused of racism for jeering at Angel Reese. The remarks weren't nice, and to be honest, they weren't supposed to be. The security guard was being referred to as everything from the WNBA's newest clown act to a power-hungry mall cop. And even though that may come across as harsh, it illustrates how frustrated fans are. Despite their desire to appreciate basketball, they are compelled to observe while league officials fabricate drama. And that's the main problem here. The WNBA enjoys discussing their progress, ratings, and how they are now being given due consideration. However, something similar occurs each time they are given a moment in the spotlight. Rather than allowing the Fever to, becomes about a police officer yelling at Sophie Cunningham. It's self-defeating, not just per optics. This league's public relations issue keeps getting worse. When supporters shout for their favorite players, they don't want to see them treated like criminals. In addition to not wanting to be told that everything is great when their eyes tell them differently, they don't want to witness ongoing double standards. This is the worst part. This wasn't even a furious altercation or a moment of mayhem. This was a festive occasion. Wholesome, pure playoff bliss. What chance does the WNBA have of getting casual viewers to care about the product if it can't even allow its players to enjoy that without making it a contentious issue? Let's move quickly to the fallout since this circumstance didn't go away on its own. As supporters began learning more and saw how unfair Sophie's treatment was, it actually gained even more traction. Online videos showed Chloe Beebe and Caitlin Clark cheering simultaneously. Both were standing nearly shoulder to shoulder with Sophie in the middle of the court, grinning and clapping. However, neither was confronted. No policeman approached Caitlin. Sophie was the only one who barked at Chloe. At that point, supporters began to piece together the story. Enforcing a rule wasn't the goal here. It had to do with communicating a message. This is where things start to become pretty interesting. Sophie Cunningham isn't your average athlete. She is feisty, loud, and unconformist. She doesn't hesitate to